Hi, I'm David from LinkedIn, and my talk is titled How to Stay Awake in the Afternoon. Catch. These may have peanuts. Not my problem.
Amazing.
So I wanted to start by thanking Terrace for setting this whole thing up, because if you've done meetups before, you know how difficult this is to wrangle everyone to give talks. And in our case, we flew in from Sunnyvale. I had no electricity at my house. Yeah, so we'll go home and we'll see how much has survived the great spoilage catch. Here, there we go. Enjoy. You get two, because you're the organizer. He's special. So the subject of my talk is actually titled A Question and an Answer to a Different Question. One of my students asked once, he said, why do people of your religious background always answer a question with a question? I replied, is it wrong to answer a question with a question? He got an A, so it was all right. You, unfortunately, get a ginger, something that's flexible ginger, because I'm running out of chocolate. Oh, can't forget the people in the corner. So I'm going to start with a real question. This is not a rhetorical question or a teaching question. The first URL you see up there is a real live URL on our website. You can go take a look at it if you want. And the patterns you see there for those first three URLs are specified in RFC. That file is downloaded to your iOS device when you install an app. Some people are shaking their heads, so you already know what we're talking about. It should be downloaded once when the app is installed, and presumably when the app is updated. And the purpose of the file is if I send you an email with my LinkedIn profile, and you click that link, iOS is going to open it up in Safari. Unless you've installed the LinkedIn app. In that case, iOS will open up in LinkedIn. How does iOS know to do that? Well, that's what this file tells it. It's the deep links file. I expect to see this file fetched off our web server once for every install. I'm not seeing that. What I'm seeing is some devices installing this file, or downloading this file, tens of thousands of times a day. Many hits within the same millisecond from a given device. We're seeing tens of thousands of hits a second on our web server for iOS devices downloading this file. If that were reflective of installs, then in a few days, every iOS device on the planet would have our app on it. We're pretty sure that hasn't happened, although it really should. That would be a good thing. So the question I have is, what are you seeing on your firewall? If you have access to your logs, take a look for this user agent. This user agent is the iOS kernel fetching the file. Our app doesn't fetch the file. We don't even know the file exists inside our app. That fetch is done entirely by the kernel when you install an app. It synthesizes that URL. This user agent pops up. If you have access to your logs, take a look and let me know what you find out. My email address is there at the bottom of the screen. And because I'm very, very old, I even have business cards. Feel free to grab one later. Let me know what you find out. And to paraphrase Matt Damon in The Martian, let's crowdsource the shit out of this problem. If it is a problem, I may be nuts. Wouldn't be the first time. So that's the question. Now let's move on to an answer. The problem I'm going to address, I'm going to first describe the problem in three different ways. If you're familiar with the parable of the four blind men and the elephant, this is the same strategy. It's just one of the blind men was out sick when I was doing these slides. So here's the first version of this problem. You edit your LinkedIn profile, and you notice the search engines like Bing don't pick up on that change. Their search index is obsolete for a while. It can take days or weeks for search engines to notice that you made that change. That's not a good experience for anybody. It's not good for you. It's not good for the people using the search engine. Different aspect of this problem is if you are running a search engine, or if you're a data provider like LinkedIn, you're burning a lot of CapEx and OpEx, capital expense and operating expense, in your data center supporting the search engine traffic, and it's not working, as per the previous slide. The investors aren't happy about this. Terrace told me to put more pictures in the slide, so every slide has a picture. I hope you're happy. Some of them are even relevant to the content of the slide. And here's the third aspect of the same problem. You live on this planet. You like to stay living here. You'd like to walk on dry land. But if we keep melting the ice caps, that's not going to happen. And you or your kids are going to be swimming in glacial meltwater. Not a problem for me. I'm going to be dead. But you're younger than I am, and your kids are younger still. So this is a problem. And it's a problem in particular at LinkedIn because our corporate parent, Microsoft, has told us to reduce our carbon emissions to 1/4 of the 2013 level. Now, we've been in hypergrowth mode for years, so to get back to the 2013 level is hard. To chop another 75% off that is very hard. And we've already done the easy parts. Rear door heat exchangers, yeah, we got that. Hot aisle containment, that's in place. Opening the windows in the wintertime, yeah, we got that too. So now what we have to do is educate thousands of LinkedIn software developers on carbon-efficient computing, that term that Prasanna introduced at the end of his talk. Problem is we don't know what carbon-efficient computing is. Prasanna and I are trying to figure that out now. So if any of you are interested in that topic, that's another good reason to come talk to us afterwards. We would love to work with you and figure out exactly what that phrase means. It's kind of like dark energy. We know the name, but we don't know what's behind it. So we got a problem. And when you have a problem, you have to make measurements. If you can't measure something, it's very hard to fix it. You can't fix what you can't measure. The measurement we have for load on our system is web calls per second, because LinkedIn is basically a giant website. Everything is done with web calls. Even the native apps are talking REST back to our servers. And when you take a look at web calls per second, you find out that a lot of the web calls hitting us are search engines like Bing, sitting in a tight loop at a constant high rate. Oh, great, now they're taking pictures of me. It's good to be wanted, although not by the FBI. Asking at a constant high rate, have you changed things? Now, I used to like polling loops. I also used to think that Tang and a Pop-Tart every morning for breakfast was a good idea. I used to think that lead paint chips were tasty, and the best way to cure a cold was to sniff mercury. One of those is not true. You can figure out which one. There is a better way to do this. We don't have to use polling loops. We can push the data. So I talked to our friends at Bing, and they said, yeah, we've been on you for years to fix this. And I said, well, there's a new sheriff in town. Let's have a chat. And they told me about a new URL they have, which we've tied into. So we have an existing Kafka pipeline that gets a message every time you edit your profile. It's pretty straightforward. All we did was add a little bit of code to dedupe that, because you typically make a bunch of edits in a row. And 10 minutes after your last edit, we call a publicly available API from Bing called submit URL. It's not special to LinkedIn. You don't have to be part of the Shelley Act corporate to use this API. Anyone can. 5 quatlus to anybody who can identify what a Shelley Act corporate refers to. And this turned out to be a huge win for us. The latency for those updates that was days or weeks was cut to minutes. I'm not allowed to tell you how many minutes, but it's a small number of minutes now. That's a pretty big win for LinkedIn members and for Bing users. Everything moves faster. Bing now has the most up-to-date index for hundreds of millions of LinkedIn profiles anywhere on the internet. No one else comes close. This is also a huge win for LinkedIn and Bing, the corporate entities, because we're no longer wasting capacity in our data centers, CapEx and OpEx, doing pointless polling loops. And that turns into a win for the environment. Less OpEx, in this case, the OpEx, the operating expense, is mostly electricity, means fewer carbon emissions. Some of our carbon emissions are sourced from hydro. What do you think the Virginia data center burns? Coal. It's all coal. Coal stacked on coal. It's coal all the way down. So if we can cut the OpEx, we can cut the carbon emissions, and that helps the penguins and the polar bears. Now, if you're from Microsoft, you're probably aware that Microsoft has no official policy regarding penguins or polar bears, but I have seen pictures of Satya Nadella in a tuxedo. And as to the latter, I've never seen Steve Ballmer. I got one laugh out of that. Microsoft said I had to do a disclaimer. Legal insisted on that, but they didn't specify the wording, so that's the best they're going to get. The win here is that we've reduced the communications between the two entities by a factor of 20. The algorithm is still big O, but I'm sorry, the big O notation is still order n, but n is now a different, smaller value. We can actually do much better than this. And that's kind of cool. We can chop the constant of proportionality. Now, when you were taking computer science classes, your professor in that lecture on big O notation probably said to ignore the constant of proportionality. I'm going to assume that happened. When I was in college, we didn't have a lecture on big O notation because I'm old enough that the alphabet stopped at M, which is why Fortran is the way it is. But when you were told to ignore the constant of proportionality, that may have been good advice back then. It's not good advice now, because when you're doing HTTP with REST interfaces on top of it, the message overhead can easily be 1,000 times the size of the business logic. That is a big constant, and we need to take a look at it. To reduce that, we can use a new API from Bing called content submission. With this, when we send the URL to Bing, we will send the associated content at the same time in the same message. Here's why that's a benefit. First off, it gets rid of the need for Bing to call back to us, obviously. Second, when we're getting the URL to send to Bing, it takes almost no extra work in that database call to get all the associated content, as compared to having to do a second call later if Bing were to call us back. Third, the data is probably still sitting in cache because you were just editing it. And the cache is no longer polluted with all that random Bing polling traffic, so it's more effective. And finally, the message is going to Bing and not to a human user. So instead of formatting the facts about your profile into some giant blob of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, we can put it in a form that's easy for LinkedIn to generate and easy for Bing to consume. Probably not a screen scraping exercise anymore. Why should you care about any of this talk, besides the fact that you just got free chocolate out of a bucket? And thanks to LinkedIn, to Facebook security for letting me steal this from the reception desk. Well, you should care if you care about cutting CapEx and OpEx in your data center, which a lot of people do. You might care if you run a search engine and are not happy with the fact that Bing's search index is better than yours. If you are, that's fine. I'm referring, of course, to Alta Vista and Dogpile. You might care if you are a data provider and have the same latency issues that we saw with LinkedIn, that your users are ill-served when the search indexes are days and weeks out of date. And if that is the category you're in, Bing is ready to talk to you right now with their public APIs, and you might chat with your friends at other search engine companies and tell them to get on the bandwagon and support that API so we can have one interface instead of a P by Q matrix of everybody building special stuff. Or finally, you might care if you have kids or want to. Because as I said, I'm not going to be around all that much longer, but you will be and your children will be, and we only have one planet. Our political system does not seem to be able to deal with climate change terribly effectively. There's an awful lot of inertia, an awful lot of installed base that doesn't want to see their investments stranded overnight. And I understand that and I sympathize with that, but I also don't care about it because I'm an engineer and I'm here to fix problems, as are we all. So if this is something you're interested in working on, I would love to talk with you afterwards, or hand out business cards for that matter, and we will work together to do what engineers always do. We're going to save the planet. Thanks for your time.
This is Brian from Google again. Were you able to actually quantify the amount that you saved in the data center, or just say that we believe it's better?
We believe it's better. We have not actually turned off any machines. We do know how many fewer queries we're seeing, and that is trending down as the old queries are slowly fading out of the Bing crawl queue. So we will be able to turn off some boxes, but we haven't turned anything off yet. It's easy to turn things on. It's very hard to get permission to turn things off. Also, our organic growth is pretty strong, so we have to keep turning things on because more and more people join LinkedIn.